get started. Welcome back. On behalf of Dynamic Fitness and Strength, this is Joe Ken and our owners, Tammy and Kurt, our production crew of the one and only James Peters. And to start off the season, we've got two outstanding guests, both good friends of mine, both in my state, North Carolina. Travis and I were pretty much neighbors, and now he moved away from me because
in an hour.
I was just dominating the area and he had to get out.
That's right.
But
push me out.
And then Craig's 2.5 hours away, so he doesn't even breathe the same air that I breathe. But we've got Travis Mash of Mash Elite Performance, as well as the head Olympic weightlifting coach and head powerlifting coach and soon to be director of all that stuff at Lenore Ryan, right down the road in Hickory. And then Craig Sowers, our vice president of sales, multi-years in the college setting, Akron, El Paso, UCLA with Yachts. He was in the private sector, worked at the Velocities in the hospital and performance area. So we got a lot of good people, which is good because you guys heard me talk so much last season. We'll have some more guests on this year. I'm going to try to be a moderator and stay a little bit out of this one because this is their expertise rather than mine as we talk about variations of Olympic style weightlifting and how is the best practices of moving forward in an athletic based setting. Let's face it, we've all, I shouldn't say all, but a large majority of us who have been strength and conditioning coaches and have trained athletes rather than lifters have incorporated some version of a clean, some version of a jerk, and some version of a snatch into their programs at some point in time over their careers. There's a lot of, some people have a lot of animosity to it. Some people don't agree with it. And again, I've also said sometimes people have overdone it where they're trying to train a sport for another sport. But there are, like we found in anything else, the best thing about training athletes is there are no right ways to train athletes. It's find the best you can find, put an organized plan together, and good things will happen if you're structured. You have a team that's motivated. You have coaches that back you. And generally, like I've always said, there's no bad exercises. There's just poor application. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that has occurred with Olympic style weightlifting. It's not that they're bad movements. It's that coaches do a poor job applying them in their programs. And coaches also do an awful job of allowing corrosive technique in these movements as they chase numbers for a record board. And I always go back to the hypocrisy of sport coaches who want to see a 400-pound clean and don't care what it looks like, but they'll yell and curse at an offensive lineman who doesn't step with the right foot on a deuce block. So we have to be better than they are when it comes to what we're looking for in our roles. It's very hard to not get carried away on test day, but you've got to hold your kids accountable because everything matters. And the last thing you want to do is not protect the kid and put them in harm's way. I mean, Travis and I have had these discussions a lot of times when we see these kids that these coaches are posting on Instagram or Twitter or other social media that, let's just face it, it's corrosive technique and they're destroying the kid. Well, destroy the coach because the coach allowed it to happen. It just happens that he's not in the picture because he's filming it.
Right. And cheering it on. Yeah.
And he's letting it go. So before I go, we've got some questions and some of them are specifically related for these guys. But before we get going, I want both Travis who can start and then Craig will piggyback. Just give us a quick synopsis of your Olympic lifting history as far as how you coach it, why, and then your own personal background as an Olympic lifter yourselves.
Well, I was at the Olympic Training Center right out of college. I was a lifter. I played football at Appalachian State, but I was more of the lifter that was playing football. And so I went out there and I got really lucky. I had Wes Barnett was my first coach, 2-time Olympian. My second coach was Dragomir, who was an Olympic silver medalist. And so But then my career was cut short. My father got sick, got lung cancer. So I moved home, started powerlifting, and was much better at powerlifting. But my first love was weightlifting. And now, since about 2011, I've been coaching weightlifting, and starting in 2014, it became more of a full-time thing, with Muscle Driver USA, where I got to be around Coach Pinlay and Don McCarley. And I feel like probably Don taught me the most about technique. But I think my experience in powerlifting, and of course, school, and then being around you, Coach Ken, I think my programming, even Louis Simmons, is varied. It's probably not the typical program that you would see in weightlifting, and what's common in America, that is. And so, yeah, as far as like the way I coach weightlifting, it really, I really would we do a very individual approach at Lenore Ryan University. We do tons of testing, but what I'm trying to find is this. Let me put it this simply. Are you, really fast and weak? Are you really strong and slow, or somewhere in the middle? And then I'll meet you where you are. And so if you're fast and weak, we're going to get strong. If you're strong and slow, we're going to get fast. So that's the simplest way to put it.
No, Yax, that's not beer, it's kombucha.
So what?
Yax wanted to know if I was drinking beer.
Oh,
He's getting that digestive health, man, that gut health.
nice.
I was just about to leave the room and go get me one if he was.
Well, you're a guest, so you can do what you want, man.
Yeah.
That's just fermentation, man. That's just fermentation tea.
That's right. I am a guest. I forgot.
That's right.
Well, yeah, I guess, I was very, very blessed to, have some awesome mentors. I worked for Mark Ryman and Dan Bailey at the University of Akron after I was done playing as an undergrad, and then was fortunate enough to go out to UCLA with Yax. And while we were out there, he encouraged me to go get my USAW certification. And so I drove down to San Diego and hooked up with this guy named Mike Bergner, who talked me into start competing. And man, I was super lucky. And when I look back and reflect on that time, it's crazy. I was a low man on the totem pole. So Yax is like, hey, Sal, we got this extension class. I think it was once or twice a month that is after hours, and you have to stay here and keep the weight room open. I didn't have to do anything. I just sat there and read or did whatever I wanted to do. And, but I had to be there. And so this guy walks in the room, and I get to talk to him before the class starts and after class. And his name was John Garham. So, just all of a sudden being able to take this information and knowledge from these guys, Pat Colin Caro, and was just amazing. And not only, so Mike talked me into competing, which I was an okay weightlifter, right? I wasn't anything special. I just loved to lift and compete and go down to his gym twice a month and lift in the garage with the group. We'd have 20 or 30 lifters lifting in the garage on a Saturday morning. And then when you're done, got to go hang out at the beach. So, I tell people all the time, like, that him coaching me helped me learn the Olympic lifts, but what really taught me was being able to stand right over his shoulder for a few years and watch him coach other people, and for him to see things that I couldn't see yet. And I was like, Coach, what are you talking about? What did you just see? And he'd explain it to me, and I'd be like, holy cow, that's not what I saw at the time, right? And it was kind of the same way when I started working with Lauren Seagrave, and he was seeing things with running mechanics that I just couldn't see at the time. But it really sped up my learning process of what to look for. And what I learned is typically what I saw was going wrong. What was the cause? The cause was typically one step back in the progression that was causing that mistake. And I learned that from Mike. And then when I went to UTEP, I connected with Dr. Richard Borden. Oh. And at the time, I was really kind of taking everything that I learned from Mike and Dr. Garhammer. And the other thing, and Yax will tell you, I got to lift at lunchtime with Aaron Okanek and another girl from Fat Elvis weightlifting with Bob Takano every single day. I got to lift with these two girls that eventually both of them ended up at the Olympic Training Center. So not only was I able to try to help them as much as I could, but just getting able to or being able to lift with that caliber of an athlete and weightlifter all the time was amazing. But then took all that information with Dr. Borden and started breaking stuff down and really kind of coming up with my own way of teaching things. And really at that time, I think is when I really transitioned it from being about weightlifting to being about taking weightlifting and transitioning it best to athletes. Because, I wasn't training weightlifters anymore. I was training athletes and trying to take that piece of it, the snatch and the clean and the jerks and all that, and translate it into an exercise that I could help athletes be better on the field. So
I'll just piggyback them guys. Unlike them, my Olympic lifting career is null and void. If I would have gotten a job with Yox, if Yox could have got me in school, he would have been my first weightlifting coach, but he didn't have enough juice to get me into grad school. So I went out to Boise State, which really was a blessing from an Olympic lifting side because I met Mike Conroy. And if you guys have been in the game a long time, know Mike at that point in time in the early 90s was the elite youth weightlifting coach in America. And Mike was an ex-BSU guy, and he was at Meridian High School right up the road from Boise State. And Mike was the one who actually started teaching me the Olympic lifts with a math professor, Carl Darby, who trained Olympic lifts in the Boise State weight room in the afternoon. So that's how I learned my Olympic lifts, because that was something that I was not really proficient in. One, because even though it was written in our programs in college, our strength coach was a high intensity coach. It was written on the cards because the coach wanted cleans and stuff on the card. But to say that we did cleans would be not so much. I think I did maybe 5 cleans in 5 years, 5 days of cleans. And we did do some jerks. We did the jerks when Coach Dooley came in. We asked the strength coach, how do you do jerks? He goes, have you ever watched the Superstars? And you know how they just throw that weight over your head? That's how you do a jerk. So that's how we learned how to do jerks in college. But
Good
I will
advice.
say, if there's any younger strength coaches here, and I think Craig, Yox, and most of us and Travis would agree, both guys brought up USA weightlifting. I would tell you, if you are an internship person, if you run an internship and you've got young strength coaches who are just climbing the ladder and have yet to get any certifications, I would tell you the first one I'd have them get is the USA weightlifting, because it's fairly easy to get, but it will be very, very helpful in them learning the basic mechanics of the Olympic style lifts from a legitimate Olympic style weightlifters. And then they can learn on their own through you guys yourselves how to adapt that to the athletic setting. Because that's the one thing that I noticed was, from a terminology standpoint, you've got to figure out the correct terminology and cues to train a football player, basketball player, volleyball player who doesn't really want to come in the weight room after practice versus somebody who walks on a platform and that is their practice. So just a couple things there. I wanted to bring this up too with Travis, because Travis gets a lot of heat in the weightlifting world for a lot of reasons. But one is, Travis, to me, is one of the first, if not the only one. He could speak to this more. I know I follow enough to know, I think your buddy Waxman maybe in California, and Garage Gym was at Dane Miller
Right.
up north. But Travis was the first weightlifting coach that I heard out loud talk about maximal effort strength. And I believe that came from his experience as a world champion powerlifter, experience with Louis Simmons, because generally everything that I was ever taught through the USA weightlifting and lifting to weightlifting coaches was a lot of the accessory lifts, and in particular the squats, were all based off of your max in the clean and jerk. Well, the truth is, as we saw with Shane Hammond and Mark Henry,
Right.
that's a joke. Those guys could outclass 120% of their clean and jerk
Yeah.
max. So, and I think that's why they were successful, because they could move such heavy loads at such great speeds. But I know you took a lot of flack with your guys showing these monster squats, and people like, well, he should be able to snatch 700 pounds with that squat. But the truth was, to me, watching your lifters live a lot, it made, especially the clean, it made the clean so effortlessly done that they had so much more energy to perform the jerk.
Right.
So can you touch on that a little bit about, and again, I know everybody's got haters or whatever you want to call, everybody wants to ruffle feathers, but you took a leap of faith like a lot of people on this show have in their programming, and it's obviously it's benefited you.
Yeah, 30 Team USA athletes. So since 2015, which is way more than anybody in the country. So a lot of my haters can keep hating, but the thing is that there was a paper. I'll go scientific, and then I'll bring it back to common sense. But like, it was Dr. Stone and it was Kendrick Ferris's coach. Kyle Pierce. The two of them did this really cool research article. They went to the 2015 World Championships, which were in Houston, and then they went to the 2016 Pan American Championships, which were in Miami at the time. And they gathered, the bar pass, and they found that really there's only like 4 main bar pass, period. And then the thing is that after about 2 or 3 years of learning the lifts, it's really hard to make changes to those bar pass. Once again, this is still them talking. This is not even my opinion. And so after looking deeper into the research, they agreed. And here are 2 purists, Olympic weightlifting coaches, and they agree that like you're better off to focus on strength than the movement, because after 2 to 3 years, the time it would take to make any real changes to the movement wouldn't be worth your time. You would be better off getting stronger. And so that's coming from them. And so I guess it just took a purists to say it for the other purists to follow suit. Because now I think if you look at USA weightlifting as a whole, now we're all, not all of us, there's still a few people like that, but the people who are winning, Spencer Arnold, they're getting people strong. I mean, there was just that girl, Olivia Rees, get this, she's a senior in high school, and she squatted 407 pounds 5 times with no knee sleeves, no belt, ass to grass. And so like, obviously things are changing. So, you got a girl that's stronger than probably most boys that you guys have coached. And so, things are changing. People are getting, now we're winning too. It's funny, coach, is that now that we're following suit, we're getting people stronger. Now we're a threat. Now we're, we're hoping, one of my athletes, Ryan Grimsland, we're hoping to, he's hoping to hit a world record. And if, he's going to the senior world championships in December, we'll be in Uzbekistan. And he's only 19, but we're going to take a real crack at world record in the 67 kilo class. And it's not just us. You got Kate and I, you've got Maddie Rogers, you've got CJ Cummings. I mean, we have several people who are now banging it out with the best of the world. But I think a big part of it is because we made the switch. We're still, my God, if you come to my practice, we're going to talk a lot about technique, but we're going to spend equal time trying to get strong. I mean, there's no doubt in the last year, Ryan has had the biggest jump of any 67 kilo lifter. And the focus has been his strength, not his snatch or clean and jerk technique. And you, of all people, know that his technique is dialed in. We spent time early on. And now he's probably got the best, snatch and clean and jerk technique in the whole country. So,
Travis, why do you think that mentality was? I mean, I grew up watching. I was fortunate enough. I think it was Milo Yachts where we could buy all those training hall videos and I literally would put those on and fall asleep at night watching those and studying them. But those weightlifters weren't weak. Those were, they were putting serious weights on their back the day before and the day after.
Absolutely. Look at Piros. I don't know, man, to be honest, because if you look at let's talk about everyone's heroes, like Piros Dimas, Lu Zhaozheng. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the great heavyweight nowadays, Lasha. Those dudes are strong. I mean, really strong. And the females, guess what? They're strong too. Kate Nye, who she's won the world championships in 2019 for America. She won the junior. She won a senior world championships, and she's super strong. She squats 190 kilos, 418 pounds. And so, and once again, this is weightlifting squats. It's not the same. I know everybody's like, well, I know a powerlifting girl who squats super high and squats more than that, but but it's not the same. They couldn't do that. She couldn't do what Kate does, I promise. And so, so things have changed. I don't know. We're learning. I don't know where that came from. I know Russia, some guys from Russia, they wrote some articles way back in the day. But the thing is, they were strong too. And I guess those guys could have written whatever they wanted because they're all taking drugs. So you can do whatever you want. You're going to be strong. So, but now we're actually having to use science and use our brains. So.
Before I jump to Craig, Travis, the other thing I think that's helped in this process of getting our athletes strong, and it could be me, is when they disbanded the on-site training hall at Colorado Springs and said, okay, all you coaches train your guys, and Piros and Mike Otone will just organize these training camps, and you guys bring your people just so everybody knows who everybody is.
Yeah, I think it was the best thing because, like, you know, who knows an athlete better than the person who raised them? You know, like I've been coaching Ryan and Morgan since they were in diapers pretty much, you know, and they, you know, like they came to me, it was Ryan was 13 and he was still doing CrossFit. You know, his mom was like, hey, will you help him get stronger to be better at CrossFit? And as soon as I saw him move, I knew right away that he was going to be a great weightlifter. And so I was like, yeah, whatever you want me to tell you, I'll make him better at CrossFit. Anyway, long story short, now he's just weightlifting. But, you know, yeah, like there's no way that you could take Ryan, who I've had now, you know, let's see, so it's 13, like I've got 6 years deep with him, and someone takes him to Colorado and they know what I know about him. It's impossible, as you well know, because everyone on this meeting would agree, when you first start coaching somebody, you're making your best guess. And then over time, you're starting to develop the perfect program for the person, because you collect data, you watch them, you get to know them, and then it's a program for Ryan. And so, you know, why would you take? It's going to go backwards 2 to 3 years before they will then pinpoint what he needs. So it's a foolish thing. And we just got coaches are better, you know, Spencer, you know, you got Kevin Simons out in Washington, who is brilliant. You know, it's just they just know the individuals better, and you know, you can really focus in on the 1 or 2 people who's in your camp. That's just awesome. And so, yeah, it just makes sense. But here's the thing. USA Weightlifting is arming us with the things that we need to do what we need to get our athletes better. Like they're helping us get, you know, treatment so they can get physical therapy, they can get massage, you know, so they're helping us do what we need right at home. And so it's definitely, but the camps are awesome. You know, yeah, I'll say one more thing about that. Is like when you go to, you know, to like the Olympic Training Center and you're banging it out every single day with the best of the best. Sometimes at first it's a really good thing, but over a long time they start to beat each other up because every single day is an all-out battle to see, you know, like at Westside. Like, yeah, you get stronger, but then you get hurt, and so that does nobody any good. So, but if you can go to a camp, bang it out, you know, set some PRs, go back home and chill, that's a more sustainable way of training.
Cool. All right, Craig. So Travis brought up a couple of points. And again, he's coming from a little bit different angle than we are, but he talked about technique. And one of the notes I wrote for you was we were luckily able to be brought up in the traditional strength and conditioning mode where you know, you're the head strength coach, or Yox is the head strength coach, and we work with every sport on campus. And you in your schools, and nothing against any of them, but UCLA, with the athletes that can go to UCLA, are going to be a lot different from a developmental standpoint than what you saw at Akron and El Paso. Sure. I mean, that's just a fact. I've been at developmental schools too. It's just the way it is. Did you, as your capabilities as an Olympic in the Olympic lifts, and you were more profound in understanding the difference between training with Bergner's crew and then training your athletes, did you see yourself having to really make much adjustments in how you coach the higher level natural athletes that were coming to UCLA versus some of the athletes you had at El Paso and Akron?
I don't know about with the Olympic list, because typically none of those athletes had been exposed to it. And if they had, it wasn't a positive exposure. I was trying to break really bad habits. You know, the thing that I saw was that, you know, I had to take some things, like I noticed right away at UTEP that I took high pulls out of my progression, because when I was teaching high pulls, because my athletes weren't weightlifters, they were starting to pull on the bar way too early. So as soon as I took high pulls out of it, they stopped that, or at least helped. And so just little adjustments like that, but I wouldn't say a huge difference in the way I taught those athletes, just because, like I said, I don't think the majority of them, especially back then, right? High school strength and conditioning wasn't anywhere where it is today. And so the majority of those kids that came to us, even though they may have had exposure in the weight room, probably didn't have good exposure to Olympic weightlifting.
All right. Well, let me follow it up with this question. Maybe this would have been the better way to answer it. Did you see, because of the overall better athleticism of those athletes at UCLA, they picked it up and were more competent faster than the athletes at El Paso or Akron?
Yeah, probably. I mean, some of those kids, I tell people all the time, back in '96 when I went out there, right, I got into strength and conditioning because I was a football player and I wanted to work with football athletes. And I went out there and all of a sudden I'm surrounded by these amazing athletes who, there was 30 or 40 kids that had just got back from the Olympics. And it was amazing to see those kids, just give them a little bit of technique and they just picked it up right away most of the time. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. Like you have this protocol, this plan, these progressions, and and as you're going through the, however your coaching style is, certain kids are going to progress at a faster rate in those lifts, and others are going to take different times. And like Travis said, sometimes it's just a matter of strength, and depending on what you believe. Like when I started out, we were big hang cleans. Like a lot of teams were hang clean versus power clean. And we didn't pick up a lot of bars from the floor when I first started college working at Boise State. So I got more into the hang clean, and that kind of got my thought process. Like, when they would talk about in those years, and Yox can nod his head, don't train athletes. Don't let athletes deadlift. It's too slow a movement. Right. But yet you're asking athletes in some components to power clean, and you don't even know if they're strong enough to pick the weight off the ground correctly, let alone as it crosses the knee, you've got to go into an acceleration phase. And oh, by the way, you actually got to catch that weight. So I always, I know with Olympic lifters, and you said something about the high pull, but with Olympic lifters, and I'll pose this question to you first, Craig. I know that in USA weightlifting and most, it's top down because you gotta be able to catch the bar. I always felt with athletes, it should be bottom up because I want them to learn how to produce force through the ground. And instead of pulling a bar, I want them to understand you push the bar. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but is there merit to the coaches that teach the power clean, going ground up versus top down in our setting, not in Olympic setting? Because I can go back and forth with the battles of, you want to learn how to receive a bar. It helps with, absorbing force and all that. But the truth is, and Mike Conroy shattered all misconceptions to me in 1996 when he said, Joe, if you can get your kids to shrug pull, you may not have to do another Olympic variation. So there are some merits where people like that tell you that it kind of holds more credibility to a guy who doesn't know anything about lifting. And everybody's telling you got to clean and snatch to be explosive. And this guy's telling me, right, if you can do a quality shrug pull, you've got what these guys need. So is there value in that, or does it matter, or is there any positives or negatives you see if someone has a bottom up versus a top down when they're teaching athletes?
Yeah, I think being young and learning from Mike at the beginning, I was a purist, right? Top down. But what I learned over time was, to your point, I can teach them how to be great from the top down. At some point, if I'm going to pull them from the floor, they got to start pulling from the floor. And so what I started doing is teaching them from both directions at the same time. Because what I found was that, I can work the top of it, right? But then we're not going home. We have the rest of the workout to finish up. So I'm able to put that bottom piece of it into it too. And so I started teaching them top down and bottom up at the same time, because I felt like I really tried to vary. I put cleans into my program on Mondays, right? And we'd run that for a full cycle of 4 weeks, but the next 4 weeks, cleans was going to possibly still be on Mondays, but I was going to do a different variation of it. So I was constantly changing that variation of the Olympic lift. And so I pulled from the ground. I did hang position, below the knee. I did all of it. And so what I found is if I didn't teach them from the ground up at the same time as top down, is that when we got to the floor, it was a train wreck, because they went to go pull it off the floor and everything broke down and flew out the window.
Agreed.
So Travis, with your guys, then we'll talk more about specific weightlifting team, college-based athletes. How much pure deadlifting will you do with your athletes? Or is that something you may do early in their career, and then they're at a certain point, there's not as much use for it compared to a squat or a front squat? Or am I wrong?
I mean, we deadlift year round. So we deadlift at least once a week. We do a lot of, it's more of a dynamic effort, but still we will do like 3 heavy singles, somewhere between 85 and 93%. And then we go and we do, we have just like Louis, we have kind of a wave, every 3 weeks, just like him. Yeah, so a little bit different. We do 5x5s, and then we'll go to, the 5x4s, 5x3s, but it's super fast. It's between 55 and 70% is where we keep our deadlifts after we do the heavy singles. But yeah, we pull, and the thing is it's all about like what you're trying to do. Like, what is your intent? Are you trying to pull the bar as fast as you can? If you do, then you're recruiting those fast twitch fibers, especially when the majority of your training is at such a high rate. You're not going to do a deadlift, all of a sudden undo all the training that you've done. If 90% of your training is done at maximal speeds, when you do a couple of deadlifts, all you're doing is getting stronger at the deadlift. And funny is that just so happens the best lifter in our room, Ryan, is our best deadlifter pound for pound as well. Ironic. And so you pull all the time, it would make sense that you're strong at pulling. So I don't know where that comes from. And I've actually tried to find, was there research that they were pulling this from? But I think it was just it was some guess that someone made. It was a terrible guess. One of the many reasons why America was not very good for so long, I believe.
Okay,
Travis,
so then let me ask you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Craig. Let me just get this one, then Craig will jump in.
Yeah.
So specifically to the deadlift with your guys,
Right.
when they're doing those heavy singles, is it more conducive to staying with the shoulders over the bar longer to mimic the first pull, or are you getting vertical like a powerlifting deadlift on the heavy one?
We will go to the point of where that might break down, but we did try to stick to a clean, but when you've seen me deadlift, I do more of a clean deadlift even when I was powerlifting.
Yeah.
I mean, I deadlifted 804, what most people consider a clean double overhand hook, and more of a clean style with with a neutral spine. And so, that's what I teach. And, even if as a powerlifter, I would teach the exact same thing. And so,
Gotcha.
yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that reverse mentality just doesn't make any sense to me. I always taught my athletes it's controlled and then explode right off the floor. If you try to be too fast and jerk it off the floor,
you get pulled out of position.
Yep. And so to have that strength and that control off the floor is huge. I think it's super important. And if you don't practice it, you don't got it.
Well,
exactly.
I even say from my own personal standpoint as a power lifter, and I'll see if Yox and Ed say the same thing with a head nod. I know for me, even though you want to get vertical, I'm very, very, I'm over control, but I need to make sure I'm locked into about mid shin before I'm like, okay, I got the confidence now to, because that's where the problems lie, right? It's from the ground to about mid shin is when the hips may rise and the shoulders are down, and that's where catastrophe strikes. So, especially when you've had some of the issues I've had,
Spine moves.
I'm like overly like I'll be the slowest fool off the floor. And that's why, like for me, using like velocity based work with a deadlift, I won't look at average velocity on my deadlifts. I only look at peak because I know I'm so overly slow
On purpose,
off the ground on
Right.
purpose. So
I get it
only
now.
look at peak, and I think there's I think even in the Olympic lifts you have to look at peak because of that with the snatch and because it's a control and the acceleration grows. It's almost like coming out of a 40-yard dash stop, right? You have
Right.
acceleration into max velocity. It's almost the same thing when you're pulling from the floor.
Totally.
It's not gonna, that you push off the floor to get rolling, and then it's off you go.
Yeah, with weightlifting, the only thing that really matters is that very final peak velocity. Because you could go as slow as you want. You see it all the time if you ever watch, people from, some Chinese lifters or Koreans. They'll look like they're doing a deadlift until the last second, and then they're able to generate enough, power at the very end to still get under it. So that's all that really matters. Like you could even start really fast, but if you slow down at when it counts, all that fast didn't do you any good. So all that matters is the finish. Is when you're in that power position and you finish into extension, how fast is the bar going? That's all that matters.
Cool. Craig, you got anything to piggyback before I go to these questions?
Hey, Peter had a question. He raised his hand.
Oh, what's up, Peter?
Pete, you're right. You had a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question in regards to the athletic ability when it came to Olympic lifts. Obviously, I haven't been in this game too long, but in my short sample size, and maybe it's being in mid-major, I'm not sure. But to me, I've seen on a lot of the super athletic kids, especially at this level, have a harder time with the more technical movements because they haven't had to necessarily have coaching for a lot of their athletic career. That is the same as someone who has to work at a harder level to be there. And so do you think that there's merit in that their ability to understand coaching cues may be at a decreased level as compared to someone who may have had to work harder?
I do.
Doesn't have the same as athletic natural talent.
I do. I 100% agree with what you're saying, Peter. I think a lot of times when you get the athlete who's just been so amazing and they've never really had to work, they just came out of the womb amazing. They're harder to teach. Now, once they get it, though, they do extraordinary things. But it's harder to teach. And then you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? If let's say you're coaching, somebody like Cam Newton, is it worth it for me to teach him how to snatch and clean? Probably not.
I don't know. Ask Jocks because I didn't have him do any of that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I would, why?
He had a with me, he had a back restriction coming in. And so we modified a lot of the stuff he did. But
with me, he was worth 100 million.
Yeah.
Well, but Travis just mentioned the key word.
Yeah.
He came out of the womb like that.
No
yes.
question.
So we got to be careful not to hurt somebody. The worst thing that we could possibly do as coaches is hurt a guy like that. So it's like risk reward. I mean, it's just the way it is.
But I will say this: if he had cleaned and snatched and stuff like that, I guarantee you he would have been very proficient at it because he was just legit. That kind of athlete. And people ask me all the time what it was like coaching him, and Joe can answer to this too. He was a very coachable person.
Yeah, he's one of the hardest worker guys we had.
Shit. By far. He worked his ass off.
By far.
That's good.
Yeah, by far one of the hardest. Extra guy, led the team with extras, was in there Fridays in our gun show Friday with his shirt off doing ads and stuff. And yeah, I have nothing but great things to say about what he accomplished for us. And he had a hell of a run for us too. Okay, let's get to these questions. We got William Fly, who I visited. They got a nice little setup at West. I always get it to R and West Cabarrus or Cabarrus.
Oh yeah.
And they've got a cool little setup. And he asked, for the high school setting, do you see any benefit in eliminating the catch of a clean to simply focus on power output? Who wants to go first? Travis and Craig? That's how I'll do it.
All right.
Travis
All
and
right.
Craig.
Well, I always say this, it depends on if you have control of the middle school coming in. So if you have control of the whole thing, I would say it's easy to set up, teach them how, get them doing front squats and overhead squats when they're, you know, 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And then when they roll into 9th grade, I don't think it's a big deal to teach them to catch. I do think there's merit in the catch because of the force absorption. If we're going to play football, especially in the era of like, you know, all of these like concussions and, you know, people getting hurt during contact, I feel like, you know, one of the biggest benefits of the clean is to decelerate, you know, the barbell, which is, you know, that's also impulse, which is teaching people how to decelerate and change directions as well. So like, I would definitely, you know, if you can teach it, but I will say this, if you don't know how to teach the Olympic lifts, you know, proficiently, then I wouldn't, and you're still going to be all right. It's just, there's more bang for your buck if you can teach it clean properly. But if you can't, there's plenty you can do without doing it, and your athletes will still be amazing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree, Travis. I mean, I think that first of all, making sure you know how to teach it properly, because if you don't, that, you know,
Yeah.
The whole weight room is a great place to get a kid hurt. But when you're talking about the technical lifts, you know, if you don't know what you're doing, keep it simple. You know, my experience, I've never had a hard time teaching athletes, but I just feel confident in my progression. And so whether it was high school, middle school athletes at Velocity, or college and professional athletes, I just never had any issues with guys catching on. But my main focus, especially in the beginning, was technique, right? I was going to get all my strength work on my pulls and my squats and stuff. And so I felt like I was very patient with the technique. You know, with most of my athletes, I had at least 4 years, if not 5. So I had plenty of time to start adding weight to those. So I was pretty patient with their technique in the beginning.
Yeah, I would say just on in my experience, there was a 2-year period at Arizona State we didn't catch. And it wasn't because of anything of, I didn't like the way we were teaching it, and I didn't like what I was seeing and what we were getting, what it was becoming in the weight room. And I was on a site visit, and I'll say who it was. I was visiting Eric Ciano. It was me and Marco Uyama on one of our May site professional development tours, and we went and watched Ciano, who trained under Stuckey with Moffitt, the Gail Hatch program, and all this when he was the head strength coach at Georgia Tech. And when I watched that team, the entire team clean, I was like, yeah, we're not doing something right. And I got to go back to the drawing board, because it opened my eyes like, okay, an entire team can look good in college cleaning. I just saw with my own eyes. And I mean, the Calvin Johnson was in there leading the way. I mean, he was repping 275 like it was 135. And I'm like, this is the best player in college football. I mean, they were a really good team back then. So Travis said, it goes back to what we said in the beginning. The best thing that we have available to ourselves is we don't train lifters. We train athletes. So we can take all the derivatives we want. And as long as they're competent and we can see some type of capabilities that look something athletic, because let's face it, a lot of what we see when it comes to the Olympic lifts are not athletic. And that's why those who oppose the Olympic lifts like to shove it down the guys who love the Olympic lifts' throats, because there's nothing athletic and there's nothing transferable to some of the stuff you're seeing. And that's why you still see these guys in college who allegedly clean 400, but then you go look at their 22-inch vertical and you're like, something ain't right.
Yeah. They didn't do 400 with a 22-inch. They did something else.
Yeah, I know what they did.
But Joe, I mean, that's a good point, right? I mean, I think that, you know, at the end of the day, I did the Olympic lifts with my athletes to improve power output and triple extension. Right. So although I'm a huge believer in racking it and catching it, as long as I'm getting the triple extension, at the end of the day, I'm getting out of that lift what I want to get out of that lift.
Right. Yeah, it's just, all it is a bang for your buck, man. It's like, but you definitely do not have to. You're better off not to if you don't know, if you don't have the right personnel to teach, or if you don't have the ability to teach, don't do it.
Yeah.
Well, here's his piggyback. I know where I stand on this. I'll let you guys go first. What are your thoughts on a trap bar pull from the hang or floor position?
It was
Go first, Travis.
I would say,
If I go first, I'll dominate the answer. So you go first.
well, there was a study done. I can't remember the guy's name that, that daggone it's, you can produce probably more power with a trap bar jump than you can a clean, based on this study. You won't get the only thing you wouldn't get would be the force absorption from it, the catch. But we've all agreed that you don't have to do that anyway. There's other ways to get that. So I think, it's probably a safer thing. If you don't know how to teach the Olympic lifts, then doing trap bar jumps would be fine, I believe. So would this study would agree with me. I'll find it before we get off here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm a big variation guy, so I think the more variations you can use with the athletes, they're not going to get bored and stale. Now, I don't want to go. Like I said, I always stayed with the clean, and it was variation of that. But if I could throw a trap bar clean or a trap bar pull into that variation, I think that'd be great because myself as an athlete, I just get bored if I did hang cleans for 4 months at a time, right? And just changing that up a little bit would be awesome. But especially with some of these kids who can't get in the proper position, to put them on a trap bar and still be able to be explosive, I think it's great.
Tim Suckelmel is the one who did the research. Anyone who doesn't know him, he's doctor now, but he did some really cool research and continues to do plenty of research that's based around everything we're talking about tonight. And it's easy to understand too. He's a real coach too. He's not just a researcher. So he's in touch with reality.
All right. So here's what we did in the NFL. And I'm 1000% sure that when it comes to training athletes, a trap bar, we did some awesome shrug pulls from a block. So we didn't do much from the floor with it, but we did block shrug pulls. And what we saw was one, technically, because as you know, Travis, and we've talked about this, me and Yax and Craig all the time, when athletes do a standard shrug pull, a lot of times it becomes a bump out. They bump the bar off the thighs and the bar swings forward and they don't get into elevation. Right. And that to me is not a shrug pull. I don't know what it is. It's a bump out. But,
it's a bad thing is what it is.
But when you put them in a trap bar and it's not capable. Plus with the trap bar, the center of gravity is in line with the hip. So now you've got an automatic vertical pull and to get vertical position in a more natural path than with a bar, especially if you go to the ground. Because as we've always talked about with weaker kids, remember, a trap bar puts the center of gravity in a better conducive position for success than a bar. Once the bar is in front of your body, center of gravity changes of the load. And that's why when guys miss early in a deadlift or to start or a clean or a snatch, that's where most of the problems occur with low back issues. So totally. What we found was with our guys, and Travis, you watched this training, Craig's been over too, but you've been over a lot, Travis, and you've seen. Our take was real simple because we were at a point in time where we were still developing guys, but there were certain things that it was just, we have no time to be worried about it. So if a guy could catch a clean naturally, they cleaned. And if they preferred to clean, they cleaned. If a guy had any issues catching a clean, our big lift was snatch grip power pulls from a
Beautiful.
block.
Beautiful.
But our skill guys, we were still doing shrug pulls with the bar. And they do 135, 185, maybe 2 plates. Well, when we converted to the shrug pull with the trap bar, and it was so more conducive and so more natural to them, we had those same guys doing 365 for multiple sets of 5. So I won. It was a Jedi mind trick. I got the same exercise and they're doing 150 pounds more, and I'm not even telling them to.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of merit with the trap bar as an accessory in athletics. Now,
I totally agree.
A lot of people don't agree. I've heard the whole, the bar oscillates. Well, I'm okay if it oscillates.
Yeah.
That means my guy's got to lock it down better. He's got to stabilize his core. He's got to engage the lats more. There's a lot of things to it. People talk about, I don't like that it oscillates, but yet then they'll do earthquake hard bench presses and squats, right? Or they'll do stuff on a sand stepper, or they do sand work.
Coach, they say that the trap bar oscillates.
Yeah, like if you push it up, you know how it'll move sometimes at the top if you come up too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a high level guy who's got a lot of different opinions that said it, and I started laughing, and then because they're the same guys that are doing earthquake car bench presses with kettlebells. I'm like, or squats or anything, or like I said, like any of that stuff. You know, uneven training. Let's go train in a sand pit. Let's go train on a sand stepper. Well, it's the same thing. But like I said, I'm a huge proponent of the trap bar and all the things that benefit athletes with it, especially the younger athlete. And then it's funny because it all comes around. All these cool things that I think are really good for like block zero, I saw some of them come, boy, they're really good for the NFL guy too. Or the professional athlete takes a lot of stress off of them. And again, their number one goal is Sundays. It's definitely not Monday through Saturday in a weight room.
I'm going to put in the chat. I found that study. So like for anyone who wants to read it, that says, yeah, you don't have to, you can do whatever you want basically. But like the trap bar jumps, you might get a little bit more power from that than you would from a barbell. It appears. So.
Got it. Okay. Next question from, this is from Jason Andrich. In your opinion, what is the best lifts or lift to strengthen your hamstrings? Travis.
Oh, well, it depends, like I hate that word too, but like it depends on, are you talking about strengthening it as it crosses the hip? Are you talking about where it crosses the knee? Like if, say as a whole, you can't go wrong with glute ham raises because you're doing all of that. But if you just want like a massive hip extension, then I got to go with the RDL, or I really like doing the RDLs with bands. I think anyone who's ever done that will tell you it will just, obviously being sore does not mean it's a good lift, but if you want something that will wreck your hamstrings and get you some massive hamstrings, I would say RDLs with bands.
Yeah, I'd agree. I love the RDL. But now that we have the inverse curl, I put that up against anything. I mean, I love that piece. I think it's just a great piece that, we tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if you have zero hamstring strength, we can put enough counterbalance weight on there to make sure that your technique is proper. And then as you get it stronger, take it off. So I think that's an amazing machine and would definitely be a part of my program.
All of our weightlifters go, like the way it's set up at Lenore Ryan, like we're up, so we kind of have our own like little room, but then they go downstairs and do the inverse leg curl. Almost every single one.
They got 6 of them.
Yeah, I know. So it's a good one though. So
I would say with both, I'd agree with both coaches, but I will say with anything, the simplest one to start is, and it's kind of off of Craig, is the partner leg curl, the Nordic eccentric leg curl, because you have to say eccentric because most people can't do it. There's material out there now from Ball Performance that shows that for whatever reason, that specific movement has shown a critical regression in hamstring muscle pulls if it's done a specific prescription throughout the week. And that's what the inverse leg curl allows, for a slow eccentric component, but it also allows the athlete to do a concentric component. I've seen a tremendous increase in my relative strength since I've incorporated that on every one of my squat sessions in different types of matters. Obviously the glute ham raise. I think another great one off the glute ham raise and Nordic leg curl family, or the knee dominant posterior chain, like Travis brought up, whether you're looking at, you doing knee flexion posterior chain or hip hinge posterior chain, razor curls. Another one no one talks enough about. Tremendous. And I like those because you can hit those for a good rapid fire up tempo to get a dynamic intent to it. Compare like glute hams, you can get a good dynamic intent concentric, but you want to be a little bit slower on the eccentric to control yourself down. And I'm talking about a pure glute ham where you start at 90 and pull up, not a back extension momentum up into a glute ham, because I consider the back extension a more of a hinge than I do knee flexion. And so if you do a back extension to the glute ham, I think you need to do a quick pause and then convert into a glute ham to get what you really want out of the glute ham. I'm a big believer. The more and more I read and the more I see it and we started doing a lot of this at the end of my NFL career, high volume knee flexion work for tendon and ligament health, banded leg curls, 4 sets of 25. I mean, everybody who follows Matt Wenning, the Wenning warm-up type of protocols. There's a lot of what you learn. It's funny because when we started in strength and conditioning, there was a phase out of isolation and single joint movements. It was all based off of athletics is based off of multi-joint compound movements, structural movements. There's no need to train these isolation type movements in the weight room. And you saw the weight rooms just start dissolving your prone leg curls and your leg extension machines and certain things like that. But then what happened is those exercises and those machines, they gravitated into your training room because that was the first step of rehab. So, hey, if I don't want to get you hurt, I'm going to bring that stuff back in so I don't see you in the training room. So it's kind of come full circle where, and again, look at all the stuff we talk about. Oh, we got to train posterior shoulder, posterior chain, and neck. Well, mostly all the exercises you're going to do for that stuff, depending on where you write it, is fairly single joint in nature. So there's merit to any exercise. It's how you use it. But yeah, I think a lot of it for strengthening the hamstring is you got to find something, that's going to strengthen knee flexion and hip extension. So you're going to have to do a combination of things to do that. That's why I do like the glute ham shows a little bit that. The razor curl does a lot of that because you start in that full plank and then you pull and then you punch out. And there's studies out there now that, as much as we want to laugh about it, that there's merit in single leg exercises at certain loads and certain percentages that have a lot of merit in hopefully protecting and reducing soft tissue injuries in the hamstring, which is the most common issue that we all face in any sport. If you're doing any type of conditioning or sprinting.
That's what we do. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think when I got with Moore and Seagrave and really learned about speed and running mechanics, that I really started taking a closer look at that and making sure that I was working the hamstring in that eccentric and concentric lengthening and shortening aspects, because that's what you do when you run, right? And so if you neglect either one of those, you're going to end up setting yourself up for hamstring injuries.
And again, I totally agree. And Craig, you may be able to, I'm going to throw something that may not sound too intelligent, but you may be able to confirm or deny it with that working with Seagrave. But I always noticed that the straight leg bounds or the Frankenstein runs will blow a hamstring up in your linear speed programs. And that's why one of the exercises I instituted today with myself to work more dynamic components was banded flutter kicks, for that reason. I think that, like I said, I hit on something today, but there's a lot of different things that come into play that get your mind out there. Like I said, your toolbox is so great. How do you compartmentalize a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, but I think too, Joe, like being smart and understand, like, hey, I just did pullbacks on the track for speed work as part of my warm up, and being conscious of that as reps on my hamstrings, right? I mean, it's like I used to tell the swimmers all the time, they'd go do dry land and plyometrics and just kill it. And I'm like, guys, I have to know that because I have to put that into my programming. Yeah. Otherwise, we're going to destroy these kids.
That's crazy. Like working with those coaches.
Yeah, it's the same thing with sprinting, right? Like we had Teddy Ginn, and Teddy was a 9 route guy and our kick return guy. And there was a couple of practices a week where, we had punt return, and he'd just finish, he'd run 6 or 7 9 routes and go routes and team and 7 on. And then he's taking 3 or 4 punts back. And if it's a leg day for him, he ain't doing legs. He already did legs today. He done did enough legs for probably 2 weeks. And Ted worked hard too, but those guys, he's got some track in him, and those guys get finicky. So you got to be aware of the personnel you're dealing with too.
Sure.
Okay, here's one that I think we can discuss. I'm not even going to try to get this guy's last name because there's just no way. And I think its first name is Kyle or Keel. Kiel. So I hope I didn't mess that up. And how to implement Olympic training within the high school setting.
If I was, number
Kind
one,
of said a little bit about middle school, but go ahead, Travis.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. There is a coach, Stan Latrell, that's in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, he's in Georgia, but now he's in the Atlanta area, and he's done a great job of implementing. They have, which coach, I don't know, you probably may or may not agree, but like they do snatch and clean and jerk from every single athlete in the school, but it's a real thought out system. It starts in middle school where they're teaching them overhead squats and they're teaching them front squats. And then it's still a football workout. They're doing bench press, inclines. It's just, he's a big believer in the Olympic lifts, and his records would have to say he's done really good. They've won a lot. His son just got a big offer from Tennessee. He committed to Tennessee already as a sophomore in high school, but he would be my go-to guy for implementing. If you're going to do it, I think the way he did it, and he's done it at multiple schools in Georgia, I would say is the way. And he did just what I said. It's as simple as that. Middle school, you're doing front squat and overhead squat. And then freshman year, it's an introduction into weightlifting. And then 10th grade, you're starting to do snatch, clean, jerk.
Yeah, so I agree. I think, Travis, to your point, I tell people all the time, imagine the foundation and the progress that athletes can make in high school if coaches would take them in middle school and just teach them with the dowel rod. Don't nothing else, just a dowel rod, and have them with great technique, being able to overhead squat, front squat, do all that stuff with just a dowel rod. The foundation that they would have to take off on.
Be awesome.
But if you don't, I'd say you take that whole freshman year, not be afraid to take that whole freshman year and lay that foundation. Because
block zero.
Yeah. What I found when I started working with swimming at NC State, and I finally got a coaching staff that would listen to me and buy in, right? I took the whole first semester, and those kids touched nothing more than a bar. That was as heavy as they went. And their progression and their takeoff was so much bigger than the athletes that we had just thrown in and started working with right away the past 2 years before that. So to take that first year, that first semester, and work on technique and position and strength work to make sure that they can hold those positions, I think is huge.
One thing I would mention too is that Coach Luttrell's got some really good data too. Like he's pretty good at tracking stuff that his teams, like he can equate. He knows that he's going to have a really good football team when he has X amount of people that can clean over 225 in high school. And so it's a pretty cool, you watch him, he's tracked it for the last almost 2 decades. So it's, at that point, the correlation is a correlation. So, yeah. But he's well aware, and he's like, if he only has a few, like he starts to freak out, and he's got a strength coach, Spencer Arnold, which happens to be coach of 3 Olympians. So he's got a pretty good guy who's implemented now for him. But like, so when they have a small amount of 225 cleans, he's on Spencer about, hey, we need to get him cleaning more. So, but it's pretty good numbers. I don't know. Causation, I would say so, but.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if I could just jump in real quick, Craig, you hit it on the head too. You got to have coaches that are going to support you. Right. And here, when I was coaching here at Midway, those freshman football players, well, all the freshman athletes, the girls too, they had a bar in their hand until Christmas time, pretty much until Christmas time, and everything was done on a cadence, and back squatting, cleaning, hang snatches. Everything was just the barbell, but you got to have those coaches that aren't giving you the damn stink eye also. And that was a good thing about me being older. I didn't give a shit. I just told them that's how we do it. But you do have to have those coaches that support you in that. And even the movements for a kid like that, kids are so screwed up coming into high school physically at a lot of places, just learning how to do those movements.
Yes.
That gets them strong anyway, to learn how to put their body in the proper extension and flexion and things like that. Just going really light is more benefit than putting 225 on their back and seeing if they can how many times they can rep it in a back squat.
Yeah.
Ed just had a good point. I used to laugh. I loved it. Coach Bergner, his program in high school, for at least the first half of the year, if not the whole first year, because he'd have like level 1, level 2, level 3. He'd have them in lines in the gym with dowel rods, and he was an old Marine, and he was throwing out cadences, and those kids, those kids had awesome technique by the time they walked into the weight room and picked up an actual bar, because he spent the time to break it down and teach it to them like that.
Yeah, still has a really good system of teaching it. I wonder how many people that guy has taught to lift.
He's taught a lot.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say on that is I like I said, if the progression's right, my only thing with the younger athletes are I would be extremely, conscientious and conservative, and make sure I am doing a tremendous amount of work on pure absolute shoulder strength and stability, because the shoulder joint at those ages is very, very crucial to the athlete. And I've seen too many kids come into my college setting back in the day that already had sublux shoulders because they were introduced to the Olympic lifts without being strong enough to stabilize the bar overhead. And I think that's where there was a little wave during time, and it might have been Mike Boyle, and I know Chris Doyle was doing a lot of clean grip snatches to help protect some of the issues that were being occurred with the wider grip, traditional grip snatches when it came to athletes. So my only piggyback would be, let's make sure we're strengthening and stabilizing that shoulder. And again, even with a dowel stick, you get the wrong kid and that dowel stick twists the wrong way and it goes something crazy. It's not going to be good for any of us. That's for sure.
Totally. I totally agree. And they don't, and the thing too, to add to Coach Luttrell's system is that the one thing he doesn't do is max. He doesn't even come close to max it on the snatch. It is simply submaximal. It's more for speed, generating speed and power. And So definitely I wouldn't have him maxing out, in the snatch, especially in that big of a group, because you're going to have somebody who should not be doing it probably.
Okay,
I was fortunate at UCLA that I had big time coaches that supported me, but I was snatched in my pictures at UCLA back in the late 90s, and we never had any issues. But my goal was to move the bar fast and to have great technique before we put weight on. So I had college age pitchers or college age athletes starting out with a bar, and that's what they worked on until their technique looked good and they were able to do an overhead squat before we put weight on the bar.
It's all about how you progress it. I think we've gone too far, with the pitchers. I would even add this, even if you have powerlifters, I wish, looking back in my career as a powerlifter, I wish I had at least have done some power snatches or some muscle snatches to keep, because you start getting so internally rotated, just to do something to open up my chest and to continue to have external rotation. I think it's a good idea. And honestly, I believe I'm going to say something that probably no one will agree. I believe the snatch is easier to teach than the clean. I can teach almost any human to snatch, as long as I get them early enough. Once they're older, it's hard. But I can teach a kid to snatch much faster than I can a clean. The key is should they be? That's the big question. So you need to know how to assess that.
Well, I think a lot of that too, though, and I think a lot of it's from coaching, and one of it's why I don't is I would agree, but it goes back to you see a bar flying overhead, you get a little weary.
Sure, I get that.
When you're tossing stuff out, okay, you're like, well, the clean I can catch. The snatch, golly, a lot of stuff can go bad. A lot of stuff can go bad, and I saw it early in my career, and that's when I was like, unless you're a thrower, where we're spending a lot more time lifting weights. I'm phasing that one out for
I
sure.
totally get it.
Here's
a good one. A good point too, Joe, about bringing that grip in. I brought that grip in with all my overhead athletes later on in my career, and it made a huge difference.
And that's a cool. And again, who was I just talking to? Oh, So I'm over at NC State. This is, and well, let me get to this little tangent, and then we'll go to John's question on the chat. I was over at NC State, and when I was at Boise, we did split cleans, alternate leg split cleans, and people like, and I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not even an Olympic lifting historian. Go back in the day and see how those people caught snatches and cleans back in the day. So you can say all you want, but I thought there was merit.
You dang right.
In the synergy and the synchronicity of that movement when it came to athletics because of what was happening with sprinting and running and so forth. Well, I was at A&T, and if you guys follow track and field like I do in the college level, North Carolina A&T's track and field can hang with them all. I think the women's team came in 4th in the nation last year. They had 2 400-meter Olympians at least. I mean,
I didn't know that.
The woman athlete won the 100 and the 200. So they got it going on. But I was talking with the strength coach. They do split cleans. I was like, I'm not a fan. He tell him there's a fan out there.
Totally.
His name is me. But yeah, I think there's a lot of, man, you can go on days and days. So here's John's. And this is a great question because I've gone back and forth with this myself when it comes to being in our setting. Coach John Patrick, I'm all about using Olympic shoes for Olympic lifts, but to educate the others, what is your input on using Olympic shoes with the Olympic lifts with athletes? Is it necessary? Are there benefits?
I go back and forth. I know if you take USA level 1, they would tell you that you need it, for safety reasons, but I disagree with that. Honestly, the more I know about training barefoot, the more I would do that. I mean, if you watch me coach my son, I have a 6-year-old who can clean and snatch better than most people you've ever seen. And I have him purposely doing barefoot because I want, as we all know, stability starts right there. If he can be stable in his foot, then it creates, the kinetic chain right up the way. It gets better and better, from the ankle to the knee, to the hip, to the back. So I would do, as little shoe as possible. Plus, if you're looking at ankles, nowadays it seems to be an epidemic that young student athletes can't move their ankles properly. And so, when you're using that shoe, that's not all of a sudden they're not mobile.
It's a crutch.
It's a crutch. All you did is you opened up that angle at the ankle a little bit, allowing there to be more range of motion for the knee to travel forward. As soon as you take the shoe off, nothing happened. You didn't get better. So I would recommend doing as little shoe as possible. And, I just see it. It's, obviously it's anecdotal. I don't have any evidence.
That's the best research out there.
I agree.
Practice is anecdotal research.
Yep.
I know you read all those articles, and every one of those references are 800 years old.
Totally. I agree.
Tell me what you're doing in your gym yesterday. That's what I want to know.
Then I'm going to say, take your shoe off. And even with myself, coach, when I'll take my shoe off and I'll start to do, I will get my mobility back, my feet, I'll start to get an arch again. And I'll start to be able to squat to depth without weightlifting shoes. And for me at this stage, that's more important to me than trying to squat 800 pounds again. So I would say, take your shoes off personally.
Yeah, I could go either way. When we were at UCLA, the second time we were fortunate, we had Adidas as our sponsor. And so we got Adidas weightlifting shoes whenever we want them. And so, I'd have my volleyball team, my men's volleyball team, the whole team had Adidas weightlifting shoes. And, I think, but part of it was, hey, these are cool. And I have a shoe that's specific for the weight room. And so, that was a cool aspect for them that they kind of got excited about and took pride in that they had those. But most of my athletes, I would say, cleaned in regular tennis shoes. The only thing that used to drive me crazy is when those soft soled tennis shoes would come out.
That can be dangerous.
Yeah, they'd be catching those cleans and stuff, and their feet are pushing out, and the sole on the shoes just shifting all kinds of different ways. But if you have a good, sturdy cross trainer, I think you're fine.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. If you're wearing those, the spongy bottoms, that's a bad idea. That's a good way to get hurt. So,
Yeah, me
Yeah.
and Peter were just talking about that with his wrestling team because they all have running shoes. And we were talking about, man, you're better off training them in their wrestling shoes or no shoe at all
Yeah.
because of exactly what you guys said. Yeah, we've had the opportunity to do Olympic shoe. I think, again, it is what it is. It's like anything else. If there's value in the shoe for the kid who has the poor ankle mobility, like, again, we all jump on different components. I got really into the barefoot flat foot, and we all jumped on the Louis Simmons Converse back in the mid 90s. And some people still recommend that to their guys or trying to find a flat sole shoe when they come in now. And I've noticed with my own training, there are times because of my limitations, I do need some type of heel, but the longer I can train without it, when I do put the heel, my depth is even better
Totally.
because of the amount of work I've done without it. And, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. I mean, I'm not selling anybody's deal, but like some of those therapists that are doing stuff on Instagram or our boy at Dr. Horshig at Squat University, there's a lot of cool traction stuff and things that you can do to work now that's out there that if you're not even trying to attempt that, I do ankle stuff 3 days a week. I've got an ankle bob and I do some other stuff and and again, for me, I have to do it 3 days a week if I want to elicit a response. So I've had to build it in on a more consistent basis because I was doing it once a week with my issues. That's not enough.
Me
So,
too.
and then I know Craig brought it up. I'm just going through the chat. He did bring up that Ed talked about the same thing with Bergner doing all his stuff with the Olympic lifts with dowel rods. I think when you guys talk about dowel rods, you talk about the sticks or like a PVC. What,
Either
maybe
or.
weigh a pound? Maybe weigh a pound, right?
Yeah.
Did you guys ever do anything to take some of the dowel, or like what we did some things where we took PVC pipe because sometimes we felt it was too light, fill it with sand and cap it
Cap
to
them.
give it a little bit more juice to it?
I think that's better than I think the PVC pipe. It's like sometimes it's even harder to get the move. Like I can go like this and it's, and almost touch my hands to my shoulders. The minute I put a PVC pipe in my hand, for some reason, I don't know what happens and I can't get down there. I have no idea.
Well, I'm not even going to attempt to do anything with this elbow. So those days are long gone. My attempts to even look competent is done.
In an ideal world, Joe, I think you're able to progress those kids through those bars. I mean, I was fortunate when Bo Payton wasn't a big weightlifter, but when Bo was coming up, starting them with a dowel rod and then going with a heavier steel pipe and then going to a 15-pound bar and then going to the bar, or going to a women's bar and then a 45-pound bar. I was able to slow play him and progress him as we worked through that.
Yeah. That's what we have. I have a 2.5 kilo bar, a 5 kilo bar, a 10 kilo bar, and then the 15 kilo bar. So like even my daughter, who's 2 years old, will play around with the 2.5 kilo bar. So
yeah,
she likes lifting more than my boys. I'm pretty certain.
Well, the way your 4-year-old was climbing that rope the other day, that was more impressive than any other thing your sons have done.
He's a freak, that guy.
Yeah, that was legit.
We're going to have our moments, though. He's too much like me. I know what he's thinking. That makes me even more mad, so.
All right. So this one's for me, John Davis. How to implement the tier system over a full year?
I want to hear this.
I could do this in 2 seconds. I mean, how do you not, right? How do you implement a 4-day split over a full year? How do you implement a 6-day split over a full year? I'm not sure because remember, the tier system is based off of choice and order of exercise. I know a lot of people get caught up sometimes that it's a cyclical base, but it's not. So if you're talking about how it works with a cycle, like anybody else's, some phases you're going to maximize strength, some phases you're going to maximize power. That may change the sequential rotations of your movements, but I don't see it as any more complicated than any other program design model out there. If I'm missing something with that question, reach out to me directly and I'll answer it better. But I think it's fairly simple. I mean, if you're designing programs, regardless of how you do it, you're going to establish your periodization calendar, and then you're going to look at the different phases or stages of the model and your macro cycles. You're going to break down your mesocycles in your programs. You're going to choose what intent you're trying to develop during that particular time. I always try to tie it into what the conditioning is for that base. I'm not going to do linear speed emphasis on the track and do volume training as the main emphasis in the weight room. So I try to make sure that that stuff's copacetic, but I don't think it's overly hard to do. It's just a matter of putting your plan together and doing the right. It's more, I think, the complexities depending on how complex you want to do is if you're big into variety of exercises, is moving exercises around as you get closer to a season. You may want to, like I said, you may be doing cleans from the floor during the developmental stage in your winter program. But by the time you get to the summer, late summer, going into a season, regardless if it's volleyball or football in the fall, you may want to convert to a hang clean or a block clean because you need better starting strength. Or you can do hang cleans with a counter movement. A lot of people do counter movement, what I call drop and go hang cleans, where they start at the waist, have a quick counter movement drop like a jump to the knee, and then go. So I think it just depends on what your beliefs are and how you're going to organize your intents as you get closer to competition.
All of those are good. Everything you just said there's a time and a place for everything.
Here's my man, Austin, who's always on, and he's not on tonight, but he did ask a question. We've already answered most of this, but I want to get it to him anyway, and then we'll wrap it up with my son's question. I'm not going to leave my man out. He jumped on today. How early in an athlete's development would you introduce Olympic lifts, if at all? And then here's the point, though. Is there a certain order that you would coach to specific lifts?
Is he talking about we're coaching an athlete, or are we teaching someone to do weightlifting?
No, I think he's talking about athletes.
Oh, like
strength coach.
I would not put weight on the bar until way later. I mean, if you want to take like a 2.5 kilo bar or dowel and start getting them going through the motions, that's a good idea because you're just teaching them, basically basic movement prep, and so other than that, I would wait till high school or on to start loading it too much unless you want to teach them how to do weightlifting. And then the debate's out about how heavy to go and when to go. I don't know. You and I talk about it all the time. I'm often curious, what is the best way? You look at the last Olympics, and you got two of the boys, and, they started super young and went heavy super young, and they're in the Olympics, and they did really well. One got fourth, almost medaled. And so, and the girls started young. I don't know the answer. I think there's not enough data. I think common sense would tell you to be very careful and to avoid, maximal weights for a long time. But you see kids nowadays going super heavy, super early, and I guess the jury's still out. I guess you also see kids on the football field banging into each other too, super early. It's way more force at that than there is, with a barbell.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. I think, Travis and I have talked about this before, all the myths out there about starting too young and all that stuff. I think if you teach them the proper technique and don't worry about weight and worry about technique, you can start them whenever you want.
Yeah.
And again, just emphasizing those movement patterns and burning them into their nervous system as they're developing. I think that's awesome.
All right. That's all I do with my kids. Like I said, I have a 4-year-old, 6-year-old, and they're already lifting, but it's just the bar. We might put these yellow plates on the, guys see, but it's not very heavy. And what we really focus on is climbing. We have monkey bars in our basement that they climb on. We do pull-ups already.
Yeah.
It's just body weight training. We're just trying to get them to play. Kids nowadays don't play. Just let them do the things that we did when we were young.
And I think that's another mistake that we make here in the U.S., right? A lot of the models that I've seen, in other countries is they start them off slow and they start them young. Maybe when they're younger, they only lift 2 days a week, and then they go to 3, and then they go to 4, and then they go to 5, and then they go to 2 a days, but it's only 1 day a week, right? And that happens over a long period of time. It doesn't happen in a 4-year time frame.
Sure.
We try to smash stuff in smashed up into too small of a window in the U.S. I feel like.
Agreed. I think there's one thing, a takeaway. I feel like that all of you could learn something, that is that I have this kid, Morgan McCulloch, who's, he was the youngest guy in America to clean over 200 kilos. He did 440 clean when he was 16. And so a legit clean too, by the way. And so, but the thing I wanted to say is when he was young, when I saw him at like 10 years old, I knew that he was a different type of athlete. However, there was one question I had, is his mobility was not perfect. And so like he could squat, but he could barely go below parallel at that time. And so there was a part of me that was like, dang it, that's going to be his limiting factor. But it was quite the opposite. What we found is that over time, his body has adapted to what we've asked it to, to the demands that we've placed upon it. And so now a guy who normally would have had and still does have deep hip sockets, now he's able to get as low as anybody else. But what he is that other people aren't is he's stable in that depth. And so I really wonder if you get kids moving through full ranges of motion early, properly, and maybe even with a slight load, does that athlete become the better athlete? Because where they would have been immobile, now they're mobile, but they're stable in those ranges of motion. But that's my theory. So take it with a grain of salt.
I like it.
All right, last question, and then we will wrap it up because we appreciate you guys. A lot of you guys staying on. We knew this would probably go at least 90, and it has. This is from Peter Ken. Okay, what are your future goals, and how do you plan to achieve them? All right, Travis, how many Olympians you gonna have, buddy?
Well, I want at least one. 2024. I should. Assuming that weightlifting doesn't get kicked out of Olympics, Ryan's got a good shot at making the Olympics. And so that's goal one. But then I want to finish my PhD, and I would like to, my goal is to take a guy who, I played college football, I was a three-time world champion powerlifter. I've coached all these weightlifters. So I have all this, experience. I want to put that in the research, because right now, you get people that do research, but they've never done what we do. They have not been an athlete. They have not coached athletes. And so like they're out of touch with what really goes on. So my goal is to bridge those gaps. That's my, that's the whole point of, killing myself at 48, going back to school. But that's what I want to do. I want to take the experience that we all have here, and then I want to do research, and then help guys like y'all apply it to your athletes.
Yeah, I guess my goals have really changed and taken a shift in a different direction. When I got out of coaching in 2015, I tell people all the time, my mission statement didn't change, right? My mission was always to help coaches and athletes achieve their dreams. And when I was coaching, I did that by being on the floor with them and writing their programs and being right beside them, right? Well, now that I've transitioned into the position I'm in now and into sales, it's still the same mission. I'm just doing that by providing them with quality equipment and, helping to educate them whenever I can. And the flip side of that is that one point in my career, I had a very selfish mentality. I get good strength coaches and try to keep them. I didn't want people stealing them. And until I went to work for a guy named Troy Medley that taught me to change my mindset and to train my coaches and develop them so that they go on to be head coaches. And once I developed that program, I was just going to keep making better and better coaches because I was going to keep modifying that program as we went along. And those coaches that went on were constantly giving back to me too, right? But because when they went out on their own, they changed things and tweaked and did their own thing. And so now that I'm in the role I'm in, my goal is to develop sales guys into being the best sales guys that they can be, and hopefully go on to be VP of sales at other companies. I know that, that may sound crazy, but I want my guys to develop and move on and better themselves. And, I told Yax, 5 years from now, if Yax wants to retire, I want him to be somebody that people want to call and have him come in and consult with them, because he's been in two different worlds that a lot of people don't get to spend time in, spending 30 plus years in the coaching and then learning sales and starting from where he started at and to where he is today and where he's going to be from 5 years. That's going to be valuable information for people who are out there who are trying to get better and become better at being salespeople and sales managers. So that's my goal today.
That's a good goal.
I'm fortunate now in the role that I'm in, that I can still be what I hope to be, and that's a mentor towards the younger coaches. And the role that I'm in now, and especially with the ability to be out and travel, that's really what I'm emphasizing. Like, I'm not necessarily worried about going to the Power 5 schools. I'm going to schools that nobody usually walks into, because those are the coaches of the future. And they need to know that they've got individuals like me who are still out there willing to help and learn about them, and that they matter, because, there's nothing, like we say it, there's nothing super professional about this so-called profession we're in. And there's a lot of things that I've learned that I want to pay it forward, because the people before me gave me this opportunity. And I think I'm in a platform now where I can remind these kids to study the history. It all didn't start in West Side Barbell. It all didn't start. This thing started way before that. And we don't, and it's like anything else. I mean, I coached guys at the Panthers that didn't know Ron Rivera played on the 85 Super Bowl team. I mean, so do you think some of these guys know really who Boyd Epley is? Do you think they know who Kevin Yoxel is? Do you think they know who Al Vermeil is? Do you think they know who, Alvin Roy is, let alone, forget about the people still walking around at the clinics. You can look at their name tag. What about the ones that came so far before us, that held that before they even knew that, oh my God, strength and conditioning. There was people before that didn't even know what they were calling themselves, that were doing weights and bringing it to sports. So I've been in a good situation to be able to do that. And again, just still continue to learn. Like Yak sent me his picture of the 3 books, and I happen to have the same 3 books. You got to continue. I'm going to sit for the sports science certification for the CSCS, because if I'm going to go out here and try to mentor people, that's not something that I grew up on. So I got to know the ins and outs a little bit more from the school side, and not just what I learned through the practical side, which is the best side. But there's certain things that I don't understand from the scientific models of what sports science even means anyway, right? I mean, we just make up these terms, and it's a culmination, it's an augmentation, of all these things. And we just lump it together, like mental toughness or culture. Talk to 100 people, you're going to hear 100 different things. I mean, so I feel like that's, and to achieve that, I mean, is you just got to be motivated to know that you've got a platform, you still got the chance to be relevant. And like Craig said, there's certain things that I'm learning as a coach that can help his team out when it comes to going out and, because I mean, like we've said it, what Coach Yox does is Yox is recruiting. He's building and recruiting is a long process. You got to meet coaches before they're even thinking about a room, because it's like recruiting a freshman, hoping they come to UCLA in 4 years, only to be told that USC offered them a scholarship the night before and they go somewhere else. It's no different in our world. You recruit coaches, you go visit with coaches, and you think you got a great relationship, and they're getting ready to pull the trigger, and somebody with a bigger name comes over the top and wants to get involved, and you get asked out. That's part of the game. You got to, that's what we're learning. But if we can go in with a good plan and understand the recruiting process of how to build relationships, recognize that matters, acquire some information and intel along the way, and then develop that relationship to a point where when it's time to be successful in business, they're going to lean our way. That's no different than coaching and developing a plan. Like you said, teaching your people to move on and build their own programs is the same thing that we're trying to do on this end. So yeah, I've been a really good spot for me. I'm going out again tomorrow and getting to see a lot of cool kids. Like even one kid, I mean, like most of the kids know me. This one kid, one of the assistants, he had no clue who I was. And I'm okay with that. I mean, because that's the world we live in. I don't expect everybody to know who I am. That's why people laugh. I got coaches that laugh at my introductory email that I send out. They're like, Coach, you don't need to tell us who you are. Well, guess what? That kid that I met yesterday had no clue who I was. So I got to give you an introduction. I mean, it's just but I mean, it's good. I'm glad that he didn't know who I was, because in some cases it kind of reaffirms that their coaches need to teach the history
Right.
of the coaches that came before them in all aspects, and learn why did you do what you did? I was fortunate. Why didn't you do this? Well, that's why I'm telling you, this is why you shouldn't do this, because I did it and it doesn't work. So yeah, it's been cool and it's been a good one. Well, hey, I appreciate everybody who stayed on.
Hey, Joe, real quick before we jump off,
Yep.
I don't know if you have your discussion for next time, but something that I've been meaning to ask you, and I just haven't had a chance to ask you. I always forget, but others on here may want to know too. Is I've always wanted to know, back when you started developing the tier system, what gave you the confidence and to really step outside of the box, right? I mean, back then you were either hit or Olympic, and to your point earlier, right, we got rid of all the single joint stuff and we were going all multi-joint, and you definitely butted the system and changed the way people thought. And so I'd love to kind of hear that thought process and how you came up with the system in a time when most people wouldn't have done what you did.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, James, if you're still on, that's going to be our topic for next month, because next month I go solo, and then in December we'll have some guests. So Craig's just let us know what the topic for next is. I'm getting all kinds of stuff up here. I was going to tell you about Travis. Hey, Travis's podcast is one of the best out there. Travis, how many years going now?
Oh Lord, probably 5, I guess. It was when
what episodes are you? What episode are you at?
We're getting close to 400. So
okay, 400 episode podcast, so it's sustainable. Our YouTube channel, I believe, is Dynamic. Man, you blow me up, James. Hold on. Dynamic Fitness USA on YouTube. This will be up to listen. Again, James is actually really good. I mean, I always say it'll be up by the end of the week, and it's usually up sooner. 60-second strength coach. I'm doing some cool stuff with the coaches I'm visiting with, I call it a rapid fire 3-piece, where I kind of just throw both of us under the fire. It's kind of fun and neat. We've got a great blog. What else you want me to say, James? But again, we appreciate it. And let's cook off another great year at Dynamic. For Kurt and Tammy, for James, and for the rest of the crew, we appreciate you all, and we'll see you again next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.